They say you can't fight City Hall. But no one ever said a damn thing about the HOA. Ours, the Brooksville Meadows Community Association, was one of those modern, manicured monsters with enough bylaws to rival a federal statute book and a board of retirees who wielded measuring tapes like swords. My family had lived on this land long before any of those plastic mailboxes or speed bumps existed, before the community standards booklet thickened into something that needed its own shelf. Our gravel driveway, winding gently from the main road down through the tall oaks, had been the only access to our house for nearly 60 years. My grandpa Henry McKinley, a WW2 vet, ex-logger, and the kind of man who drank coffee so black it offended light, built it with his own hands in the late 60s. This land was carved, not bought, he used to say. And that road? That was the first thing he ever laid down here. Like a handshake to the earth. So imagine our confusion when one Monday morning in April, we found a 6-foot-tall metal fence across the top of the drive. No warning. No letter. Just a big, shiny wall, padlocked, with a laminated sign that read, "Private easement revoked. Do not enter. BMHOA." I remember staring at it, still holding my travel mug like I'd accidentally brought a pool noodle to a gunfight. My mother thought it was a prank. Grandpa? He didn't say anything. He just stared at that fence with the slow, controlled breath of a man who'd seen too many things built and too many things torn down. He turned, shuffled back toward the garage and muttered, "Time to wake her up." We all knew who her was. Old Bessie. The rust-covered red and gold 1975 Caterpillar D8 bulldozer that Grandpa had kept in a steel shed behind the barn, under a blue tarp and a pile of old tires. He hadn't driven her in maybe 15 years, but he'd kept her oiled, clean, and always said she'd get her legs back when the world tried to get cute. And I guess to him this fence was cute. To me it was insane. I was already trying to call the HOA, check emails, file complaints. I wanted to do it by the book. Grandpa didn't read that book. He read a different one, probably carved into the bark of a tree with a pocket knife. Within the hour, the hum of diesel cut through the morning. That shed opened like the mouth of a sleeping dragon. Bessie rolled forward in slow, commanding groans, metal squealing, gears coughing, like even the machine was angry to be disturbed. Grandpa climbed into that seat like he never left it, his old flannel sleeves rolled up, his boot knocking the rust off the side rail. A cigarette hung loose from his mouth. He didn't even light it. It was just there like punctuation. "Where you going, Grandpa?" I called out, still hoping this was just some symbolic rebellion. "To reclaim our front door," he answered, voice crackling like his AM radio. "Won't be long." I tried to stop him, really I did. But there was something about that moment, seeing the old man become something larger than life again, that made even reason take a step back. Neighbors peeked from porches. Dogs barked. Somewhere, a lawn sprinkler hissed quietly, as if unsure whether to keep watering or just watch. Bessie reached the top of the drive. Grandpa revved once. The fence stood tall, shiny, smug, and utterly unprepared for what came next. He didn't crash through it. Not at first. He let Bessie idle there, big and angry and rumbling, while he climbed down, walked up to the sign, and tore it off the gate like it was junk mail. Then, gently, with the care of a man sweeping dust from a family portrait, he pulled a black marker from his pocket and scrawled on the blank back of the sign, "This ain't over." Then he taped it back up. Then he got back in the bulldozer. And then the damn thing growled forward, slow, steady, as if asking the fence politely to move. It didn't. So he pushed. Steel crumpled like soda cans. The lock popped like a champagne cork. And just like that, 60 years of tradition ran right over 6 months of bureaucracy. The road was open again. Grandpa rolled Bessie back into the shed, dust clouds trailing him like war smoke. No victory speech. No dramatics. Just a nod. "Let 'em call whoever they wanna," he said. We were here first. The dust hadn't even fully settled before the fallout began. By mid-afternoon, my inbox was a digital minefield of formal complaints, legal jargon, and HOA subject lines screaming in capital letters. The board wanted a meeting. The president, Meredith Tisdale, a woman whose entire identity seemed built around clipboards and clucking disapproval, was already circling the neighborhood like a hawk with a printer. She marched straight up our reopened driveway, khakis pressed, sun visor tilted just so, holding a printed photograph of Grandpa and the bulldozer like it was a mugshot. "Do you know the consequences of what's been done here?" she demanded, her voice clipped and nasal, like a car horn trying to sound official. I tried to stay calm, leaning against the porch rail as Grandpa sat behind me on his rocking chair, polishing a wrench for no reason other than it gave his hands something to do. "What's been done?" I said, is someone put a fence across our only road without warning. That easement is not registered. The land belongs to the HOA now, she snapped, tapping the photo with her French manicured nail. Per the updated boundary map in Clause 14b, Clause 14b can kiss my hole, Grandpa muttered, but I cut him off with a hand gesture that was half, stop, and half, please don't start a war right now. Meredith turned to him. Sir, do you realize what you've committed is technically destruction of property? That was an official HOA-sanctioned barrier. Grandpa didn't look up. Then it shouldn't have been made of tin foil and poor judgment. I admit I chuckled. I shouldn't have. But watching a man in his 80s outwit a power-hungry HOA officer with nothing but dry wit and a rusty bulldozer was the kind of TV I would have paid to watch. Meredith didn't laugh. We'll be pressing charges. Expect a summons. She left in a cloud of cheap perfume and fury, high heels clicking like a court gavel all the way down the newly reclaimed drive. I turned to Grandpa. You know they might actually try to take this to court, right? He just shrugged. Let him. Courts have doors. We've got roads now. That was the thing about Grandpa. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. But when he believed something was right, not just legally but morally, he became immovable. Like a mountain had decided it didn't like where you were standing. The rest of the neighborhood? Well, that's where things got interesting. Half of them came over that evening to quietly whisper their support. Turns out, we weren't the only ones tired of the HOA's overreach. One guy, Mr. Patel from 3 doors down, even brought beer. I never liked that fence anyway, he said, handing Grandpa a cold bottle. Felt like it was splitting the neighborhood in two. My dog stopped walking that way because she thought it was a dead end. Others followed. A few teenage kids who'd used the gravel path to bike down the hill stopped by to thank Grandpa. An older couple who had been fined for improper flower selection stood awkwardly at our gate with a plate of brownies. No one was bold enough to say it outright, but the message was clear. You did what we all wanted to, but were too afraid. By nightfall, our porch looked like the aftermath of a small town revolution. Lawn chairs, paper plates, laughter. Someone even brought a portable speaker and played classic rock at low volume. It wasn't a party. Not really. More like a quiet declaration of independence, the kind where people look around and realize they've been controlled by something small-minded for too long. Grandpa didn't revel in the attention. He just sat there, sipping his beer, that ever-present cigarette still unlit between his fingers, eyes on the road like it might disappear if he blinked. And maybe that's when it hit me, this wasn't just about a fence. This was about history, memory, ownership. Not the legal kind, but the kind that comes from generations of footsteps, tire marks, and sweat soaked into gravel. That road had seen family barbecues, rainy night tow trucks, prom pictures, and barefoot summers. And a boardroom full of strangers thought they could put a fence on it like it was nothing. But to Grandpa it was everything. And to more people than I expected it was something too. That night, before heading to bed, I stood at the top of the drive and looked down at the path Bessie had cleared. It wasn't perfect. The fence had left gouges in the dirt, the grass was torn, and the smell of oil still hung in the air. But it was open. That mattered. And for the first time in weeks, the house felt like it had its front door back. Just a road. Just a driveway. Just a message that said, we're still here. 3 days after the fence met its untimely death under Grandpa's bulldozer, a man in a gray suit showed up at our front porch holding a manila envelope like it was a live grenade. He was polite, unnervingly so. Mr. McKinley? He asked, even though Grandpa's name was printed right there on the envelope. You've been served. He handed it off, nodded once, and walked away, shoes clicking like the lawyer version of a mic drop. Grandpa didn't even open it right away. He just stared at it, weighing it in his hand like it might be hollow. Then he set it down on the table beside his coffee and said, "Guess they're serious now." I opened it myself, flipping through the packet thick with legalese, stamped seals, and a whole bunch of language that basically boiled down to destruction of private property, violation of community codes, intentional trespassing, and endangering public safety. Public safety? I nearly laughed. The only person who came within 10 feet of the bulldozer was Grandpa, and that man could parallel park a mountain if he wanted to. The document gave us 14 days to respond, either by removing the offending machinery from the property, submitting to arbitration with the HOA, or preparing for civil court. Grandpa didn't even flinch. "Court it is, then," he said as casually as if he were choosing between sweet tea or lemonade. I should have panicked. I didn't. Because deep down I knew something that the HOA didn't. You don't scare a man who once pulled his own tooth with a pair of pliers during a snowstorm. You especially don't scare him with paperwork. But we knew we couldn't just stroll into court empty-handed. So I spent the next few days collecting every scrap of documentation I could find. Old land surveys, driveway permits from the 60s, faded maps from the county archive, and one glorious photo of Grandpa in 1971 standing beside the freshly finished gravel road, grinning, shirtless, and holding a shovel like it was Excalibur. We needed more than sentiment, though. We needed a lawyer. That's when Aunt Jo stepped in. Technically she's my great-aunt, Grandpa's youngest sister. But she's a legal shark with a temper like boiling oil and a wardrobe consisting entirely of black suits and steel-toed heels. She drove in from 2 towns over, read through the HOA's filing, and let out a slow, amused breath. "They really picked the wrong hill to die on," she said, eyes narrowing like a bird of prey spotting a limping rabbit. Grandpa gave her a nod. "They think just 'cause they got letters after their names and laminated IDs, they can tell folks who built the land how to live on it." "We'll remind them," Jo replied with a small, sharp smile. While Jo crafted her legal counterattack, including a countersuit for unlawful obstruction of an established easement and emotional distress, which Grandpa rolled his eyes at, but let her file anyway, the neighborhood started shifting again. We noticed lawn signs popping up. Handwritten ones. Printed ones. Painted ones. Some said, "Let Henry drive," others had little doodles of a bulldozer smashing a fence with the words, "Built, not bought." Someone even made stickers. It was absurd. It was glorious. Meredith and the HOA didn't take it well. She sent out a newsletter calling the whole thing an unfortunate example of personal pride endangering shared values. But nobody cared. You could tell by how empty the community room meetings became. By how even the most HOA-loyal neighbors, the ones who used to measure grass height with rulers, suddenly had excuses not to attend. And then came the inspection threats. Grandpa got a notice claiming our mailbox post was non-standard material. It's been the same post since 1982. Then they said our garage light exceeded brightness limits. It's 60 watts. Jo filed restraining orders, cease and desist letters, and what she called legal booby traps. It turned into a full-on Cold War. They'd file, she'd counter. They'd threaten, she'd subpoena. Meanwhile, Grandpa kept living exactly as he always had. He mowed the lawn. He fed the chickens. He rebuilt Bessie's starter motor just because he didn't like how she coughed in reverse. The court date loomed closer. Every day I expected him to show some nerves. But Grandpa was granite. Unshakable. When I asked him why he wasn't worried, he just said, "You don't fret over someone trying to steal what you've already earned. You just make sure they don't succeed." I thought about that as I watched the sun set over the gravel road, the one he built, the one they tried to erase, and the one still standing open, tire tracks and all. They might have had legal teams, glossy newsletters, and community codes, but we had Grandpa. And Grandpa had a bulldozer. And faith. And a sister with a legal degree and a grudge. The game was on. The courthouse smelled like lemon-scented floor cleaner and cheap polyester. The kind of place where time slowed down just enough to make everyone uncomfortable. We arrived early, partly because Aunt Jo insisted on reviewing every page of our countersuit for the 5th time, and partly because Grandpa wanted to scope the room. He walked in like he was stepping onto a battlefield, not a courtroom, boots freshly polished, flannel tucked in, his old army pin clipped to the collar. And yes, he brought the laminated photo of him and Bessie the bulldozer like a family portrait. Meredith showed up late, of course, flanked by her lawyer, a young man who looked like he'd just graduated from law school and still hadn't figured out how to hold a briefcase without looking like he borrowed it. She wore a stiff blue suit that screamed authority, but her eyes kept darting toward Grandpa like he was a wild animal she didn't trust not to bite. The judge was a middle-aged woman named Rhonda Ellison, known in our county for her no-nonsense approach to petty cases and a deep dislike for wasted court time. When she sat down, glanced at the files, and sighed loud enough for the court recorder to blink, I knew we had a shot. "Let me get this straight," she said, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. "The HOA blocked a residential driveway that's been in continuous use since 1967, and when the resident removed said blockade, you're suing him for property damage?" Meredith's lawyer stood, all puffed up and full of citations. "Yes, Your Honor. The easement in question is no longer legally recognized due to changes in the HOA charter, which, Your Honor," Aunt Jo cut in, rising smoothly, "was amended without proper notice to the landowner and in direct violation of County Code 3.18 regarding historical right-of-way." The two lawyers traded volleys of legalese while Meredith sat stiff as a statue and Grandpa sipped from the courthouse water cup like he was back at a Sunday picnic. Then came the part we all knew was coming, Exhibit C. The HOA had footage from a neighbor's Ring camera. Meredith's lawyer queued it up like he was presenting a war crime. There, on the grainy footage, was Grandpa in all his flannel glory, climbing into the cab of the bulldozer. Then Bessie roared to life, the camera shaking slightly from the rumble. The gate appeared. And then, in glorious cinematic motion, destruction. The court was silent. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Then, slowly she turned to Grandpa. "Mr. McKinley," she said, "did you drive a bulldozer through the HOA-installed fence?" "Yes, ma'am." "And do you deny that action caused damage to the property?" "No, ma'am." "Do you understand that's a serious matter?" Grandpa nodded. "I do. But I also understand that if you're going to build a wall where a road's been for half a century, you better be ready to watch it fall." Silence again. Then the judge asked, "Do you have evidence that the driveway predates the HOA boundary changes?" Aunt Jo stood like she'd been waiting her whole life for that question. She approached with a folder full of exhibits: old deeds, surveyor maps, photographs, even a signed affidavit from a 94-year-old neighbor named Jean who'd lived there since 1950. "All properly notarized," Joe added, slapping the final document down like the last card in a winning hand. Meredith's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Then came the countersuit. Joe presented evidence that the HOA had altered land boundaries without proper vote or legal filing, that they had obstructed emergency access to the McKinley property, and that they had knowingly harassed a resident through repeated code violations that were inconsistent with prior enforcement. She even included screenshots of the HOA's group emails where Meredith referred to Grandpa as a stubborn liability. "Stubborn, yes," Joe said, "but not a liability." The HOA, on the other hand, she let the sentence hang like a noose. The judge didn't rule that day. She said she needed time to review the documentation. But as we walked out, even the clerk gave Grandpa a little nod. Not of agreement, necessarily, but of respect. Outside the courthouse, reporters from the local news were waiting. Someone must have tipped them off. "Is it true you ran over an HOA fence with a bulldozer?" one asked, shoving a mic near Grandpa's face. He squinted into the sun. "Don't believe everything you read," he said. "It wasn't just a fence. It was an insult." And with that he turned and walked to the truck. We didn't know how the judge would rule. But for the first time since that fence went up, I realized this wasn't just a battle for a driveway. It was a fight for something older, something deeper, the right to stand on your own land and not have to ask permission to get home. And in that moment, Grandpa didn't look old. He looked undefeated. By the time the local news aired the segment titled, "Driveway Justice, Vietnam Vet Bulldozes HOA Barrier," things had shifted far beyond our small neighborhood. It wasn't just a story about a stubborn old man and a gate anymore. It had become a kind of cultural flashpoint. Comments flooded in online. Some called Grandpa a hero. Others thought he was reckless. But everyone had an opinion and everyone had picked a side. At the town diner, where Grandpa liked to get his corned beef hash on Thursdays, strangers started paying for his coffee without saying a word. One afternoon, a kid barely out of high school walked up, shook his hand and said, "My granddad would have done the same thing. Thanks for standing up." Grandpa just grunted, but I could see it in his eyes, a flicker of pride hiding behind his usual stone face. What surprised us even more was how many people outside our HOA started coming forward with their own horror stories. A Facebook page popped up overnight, "Fences and Fines, HOA Horror Stories," and within days it had thousands of members from all across the state. Photos of ridiculous violations poured in. A woman fined $50 for planting daisies too close to the sidewalk, a retired teacher told to repaint her porch because her beige was not the approved beige. And there, right in the middle of it all, was a screenshot of Grandpa on the bulldozer, mid-demolition, like a symbol for everyone tired of petty control. Meredith and the HOA didn't know what to do with the attention. They tried putting out a statement claiming they had followed proper procedures for safety and uniformity, but no one was buying it anymore. Even their loyal members, the ones who used to report leaf piles or untrimmed hedges, started going quiet. Some even apologized. One woman named Diane, who once filed a formal complaint because our trash bins were visible for 27 minutes longer than allowed, stopped by with a lemon pie and a nervous laugh. "I may have overreacted a bit," she said. Grandpa nodded slowly. "A bit." The judge hadn't ruled yet, and the delay started to feel intentional. Aunt Jo thought maybe the court was trying to cool things down, but I suspected Judge Ellison was watching the temperature rise on purpose. Letting everyone see what this fight had become. Letting people pick a side. Meanwhile, Grandpa stayed quiet. He didn't give interviews, didn't post online. When someone sent him a t-shirt that read "Bulldoze the Bureaucracy," he wore it once to mow the lawn and then used it to clean engine parts. That was Grandpa, All action, no show. But inside the house, something had changed. Late one night, I found him in the garage, sitting on Bessie's track, staring at the grease-stained easement map like it was a memory from a past life. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on the page. "I built this road because my kids needed a safe place to ride their bikes. Back then we didn't have much, but we had space. And when you got space, you protect it. No matter who puts a gate on it." I sat down beside him, both of us silent for a while. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about the present. It was about legacy. Every patch of gravel, every post hole filled with concrete, every tire rut carved from decades of life, it all mattered. This was Grandpa's signature on the land. And someone tried to erase it with a fence and a form. But the public didn't want it erased either. Letters began arriving in our mailbox. Real ones, handwritten, some from counties we'd never even visited. One came from an elderly couple in Arkansas who said their HOA banned them from putting up a ramp for their disabled son. Another from a young veteran in Florida who wrote, "Seeing what you did gave me the push to finally challenge my HOA too." It wasn't just about driveways anymore. It was about dignity. It was about space. It was about not being pushed out of your own damn yard. And even as Meredith doubled down, calling for an emergency board vote to suspend Grandpa's community access rights, the neighborhood turned. A petition started. Then a rally. Then someone spray-painted "Freedom starts with a road" across the now empty spot where the fence had stood. Meredith had it scrubbed off within hours, but it didn't matter. The message was out. And everyone heard it. The ruling came down on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind of overcast that made the house feel quieter than usual. No birds. No wind. Just the waiting. Aunt Jo was already seated at the dining room table, two laptops open, reading glasses perched low like she was decoding satellite data. Grandpa? He was outside, rocking gently in his chair on the porch, sipping black coffee like it was any other day. No matter what the envelope held, he'd already made peace with whatever came next. But I hadn't. My stomach flipped when I saw the mailman walk up the drive, slow and cautious, like he knew the letter he was carrying might trigger something legendary. "It's here," I said, breathless, holding the envelope out like a loaded mousetrap. Jo snatched it, slid it open, and scanned the first page, her eyes dancing fast. Then, without a word, she flipped it around and placed it on the table in front of me and Grandpa. There it was, in all its dry legal glory: the court finds in favor of the defendant. The HOA's claim? Dismissed. The countersuit? Partially upheld. The judge's reasoning was brutally clear. The HOA had failed to provide reasonable notice, had not filed the updated charter with the county properly, and had acted in bad faith by obstructing a long-standing easement without lawful authority. In short, Meredith and her crew tried to rewrite history and the court wasn't having it. But it was the last paragraph that really landed the punch. The judge wrote, "In communities where history and ownership are intertwined, bureaucracy must serve the people, not displace them." Grandpa chuckled when he read it. "Took her long enough," he said, setting the letter down like it was a grocery receipt. Jo was less casual. "We've got 30 days to file for damages," she said, flipping to the back page. "They owe us for the legal fees, the emotional harassment, and the driveway repairs." Grandpa shook his head. "Don't want their money." "You earned it," Jo snapped. "Doesn't mean I want it." That was that. For Grandpa, the point had been made. The message sent. He didn't need the HOA's dollars. He just needed his road. And now, legally, finally, it was his again. But if you thought that was the end of it, you don't know Meredith. The woman didn't show up in person to the next HOA meeting, but she sent a proxy and a new packet of reform proposals that included mandatory inspections of any property older than 25 years, tighter noise restrictions, and, believe it or not, a ban on operating heavy machinery within residential zones. The gall of it. Jo laughed so hard she nearly fell out of her chair. "She's doubling down," I said, watching Grandpa leaf through the proposals like he was reading a badly written sci-fi novel. "She doesn't get it," Jo muttered. "This wasn't about bulldozers. This was about power." Grandpa didn't say anything. He just got up, stepped off the porch and walked toward Bessie, still parked proudly under the tarp out back like a slumbering dragon. He ran his hand along the metal, checked the oil, and gave her one slow nod. "Just in case," he muttered. That night we had visitors. Half the neighborhood showed up with lawn chairs and folding tables. Someone brought brisket. Someone else brought a cooler full of lemonade and beer. Nobody said the word victory, but it hung in the air like summer humidity. One by one, neighbors came up to Grandpa to shake his hand, pat his back, or just offer a quiet thank you. Even the ones who'd stayed silent when the fence first went up now admitted they'd been afraid to speak out, afraid of fines, letters, retaliation. "You weren't just fighting for your driveway," one woman said. "You were fighting for all of ours." Grandpa didn't say much. He never did. But he raised his glass, black coffee of course, and gave a small, rare smile. The kind that meant something had settled inside him. Not peace exactly, but resolution. A week later, Meredith resigned. Officially, it was for health and family reasons. Unofficially, everyone knew she'd lost the neighborhood. A new board was elected. One that promised transparency, open dialogue, and most importantly, respect. And that gate? It never went back up. The posts were quietly removed, the trench filled in, the gravel smoothed. Like it had never been there at all. Except now, right where the fence used to stand, someone had stuck a small handmade sign. McKinley Drive, St. 1967. Reclaimed 2025. What started as a backyard battle turned into something bigger. Way bigger. A week after Meredith's resignation, Grandpa's story was picked up by a national morning show. They ran a 3-minute segment called Bulldozer Grandpa, the man who took on the HOA and won. They played the Ring camera footage again, this time over dramatic music, and cut it with interviews from neighbors, Joe, and, somehow, even the mailman. Grandpa didn't say much during his part of the interview. Just looked straight into the camera and said, "Don't block my road." It became a meme in under 24 hours. People were sharing gifs of Bessie plowing through the gate with the words, "HOA this." College kids turned it into a chant. Someone even auto-tuned Grandpa's line into a remix that hit 500,000 plays by the weekend. He had no idea, of course, he didn't use social media. But we showed him the clips and he snorted, "People got too much time on their hands." Still, I noticed he smiled just a little when someone sent him a t-shirt with hashtag McKinley Drive Strong printed across the chest. And then the politicians got involved. A local councilwoman showed up on our porch one morning with her assistant and a fresh-baked pie. She wanted to talk grassroots land rights. Grandpa listened politely, then excused himself to go clean spark plugs. Joe handled it, she always did. The councilwoman asked if we'd consider speaking at a town hall on overreach and individual property rights. "You might inspire others," she said. Joe said we'd think about it. Grandpa didn't say anything, but I knew his answer. He hadn't bulldozed the gate to be a symbol. He'd done it because it was his road, and no one tells him he can't drive on his own damn road. Still, the invitations kept coming. University panels. Property law podcasts. Even a well-known civil liberties group sent us a plaque. Grandpa used it to level a wobbly workbench in the shed. But not everything was glory and fanfare. The story stirred up anger in places we didn't expect. HOA leaders from other communities called it dangerous. One blog accused Grandpa of romanticizing vigilantism. A news pundit on cable called him a symbol of entitlement, to which Joe responded by sending them a scanned copy of the deed from 1967, along with a sticky note that read, "Entitled? No. Documented? Absolutely." Grandpa didn't flinch at the criticism. But I did notice that he spent more time walking the road. Just walking it. From the top of the hill where the old mailbox still stood, all the way down to the tree line where the gravel faded into forest. Maybe he was making sure no one touched it. Or maybe he just wanted to remember why he fought. Meanwhile, Bessie, the bulldozer, became a celebrity in her own right. People came by just to take pictures with her. Joe finally built a little fence around her, an ironic one, Grandpa said, and added a sign that read, "Retired. But not forgotten." It didn't stop the tourists. One couple drove all the way from Tennessee just to see the Gate Slayer. And then came the documentary crew. A pair of filmmakers from Oregon, skinny jeans, beanies, the whole vibe, showed up with fancy cameras and a pitch. A short doc called Lines in the Gravel. Joe agreed to the interviews as long as they didn't edit anything to make Grandpa look like a cartoon. They promised they'd keep it real. Grandpa gave them 20 minutes. He sat on his porch, arms folded, eyes squinting toward the road. "I didn't do this for anyone but my family," he told them. "I built that road with my own hands. You can't unbuild something like that with a clipboard and a rulebook." That quote ended up on the poster. Months later, when the doc hit a film festival in Austin, it won a local award. Grandpa never went. Didn't need to. He said the only award he wanted was the sound of tires crunching on gravel again. And that's exactly what he got. Every morning, same time as the sun came up behind the tree line. The same road, the same land, the same man. Just with a few more people watching now. He never asked for fame. But somehow by standing his ground he became a quiet reminder to a noisy world. Some things are worth fighting for even if all you've got is a bulldozer, an old map, and a whole lot of history. Months passed, and the buzz faded like the sound of cicadas after summer ends. The reporters stopped calling. The posts about Grandpa slowed down. The world, as it does, moved on to other stories, shinier battles, louder protests, newer heroes. But here on McKinley Drive things didn't just go back to normal. They settled into something better. The new HOA board, younger and quieter, respected the land more than the rules. They scrapped the old codebook and replaced it with something simpler. Keep it clean. Keep it safe. Talk to your neighbors. No more citations over mailbox paint. No more fines for garden gnomes. And certainly, no more fences across roads that weren't theirs to begin with. A few folks moved out, including a couple of Meredith's close allies, but no one missed them much. In their place came families who liked the sound of wind through trees better than the hum of lawn edgers. Kids played in the ditches again, digging up rocks and pretending they were buried treasure. One boy even asked Grandpa if he could drive the tank. Grandpa just laughed, ruffled his hair, and said, "Maybe when you're older." Bessie stayed parked, but now she had a new shelter, a small wooden overhang Joe and I built together, with a sign that read, "Respect your elders." Grandpa didn't say much about it, but he stood under the roof for a long time after we finished, just staring at her like she was a war buddy. The kind you don't need to speak to because they already know. Grandpa had slowed down some. His knees creaked more, and he grumbled a bit louder when the coffee wasn't hot enough, but his eyes still sparkled when he looked down that stretch of gravel. Every morning he'd take his walk, not out of suspicion anymore but out of habit, out of reverence. That road was part of him, just like his hands, just like the scar on his jaw he got fixing a busted fence back in '82. One afternoon I asked him, would you do it again if they tried to block it? He didn't answer right away. Just watched a squirrel chase a leaf across the gravel. Don't think I'll need to, he finally said. But yeah, every time. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about revenge. It was about memory. About roots. Grandpa always said a man should fight hardest for the ground his people walk on. That if you give that up, even an inch, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to get it back. And now the rest of the town seemed to understand that too. Schools started teaching about property rights with his story as an example. The local library put up a little display, local legends, the bulldozer, the gate, and the man who wouldn't move. They even got a replica of the easement map printed on a canvas, with Grandpa's notes and measurements preserved like art. Joe got teary when she saw it. Grandpa muttered something about it being overkill, but I noticed he walked through that aisle 3 times when no one was looking. Even the gravel changed. What used to be just rocks and dust became something like a monument. People respected it. No litter, no tire marks from joyriders, not even a stray weed out of place. It wasn't sacred in a religious sense, but there was reverence there now. You could feel it. You could hear it, the crunch under your shoes like a kind of soft anthem. Neighbors started calling it the lane. As if it had always had a name and we'd just forgotten until now. But to us, to Grandpa, it would always be what it had been from the start, ours. McKinley Drive wasn't just a strip of land anymore. It was a line drawn in time, connecting generations, linking past with present, protest with peace. Grandpa didn't want fame. He didn't want applause. He just wanted what he built to be left alone. And finally it was. The fight with the HOA had lit a fire, but it didn't burn the place down, it burned the rot out. What remained was stronger than before. More neighborly. More real. And every time I see Grandpa sit on that porch, coffee in hand, staring down that road like it's an old friend, I know he won more than a court case. He won something no board or bylaw could take away. He won home. The last time I walked the length of McKinley Drive with Grandpa was on a warm evening in late July. The sun was low, the kind that paints the trees gold and stretches shadows into stories. He didn't walk as fast as he used to, every step was slower now, measured like he was counting them. I matched his pace without saying anything, just listening to the soft crunch of gravel beneath our feet. That sound had come to mean more to me than any anthem or pledge. It was the sound of stubbornness, of memory, of home. We didn't say much on that walk, not until we reached the spot where the gate used to be. The posts were gone, but the outline still lingered faintly in the dirt, like a scar. Not ugly, just a reminder. Grandpa stopped there and looked down, then up at the trees that had stood witness to it all. They tried to erase this, he said, his voice rough with dust and time. Didn't know you can't rewrite roots. I didn't answer, didn't need to. He looked at me then, something thoughtful in his eyes. You gonna keep walking it when I'm gone? I blinked. Swallowed. Every day, I said. He nodded once like he already knew the answer and we started the slow walk back. Since then Grandpa hasn't been as active. Bessie's still there, her tarp cleaner than usual, the area around her swept as if waiting for a parade that won't come. But that's okay. Not every monument moves. Some just sit there, quiet and solid, letting people remember. And Grandpa? He still sits on the porch every morning. Same mug. Same spot. But now when folks pass by on their walks they wave first. Some stop to chat. Some bring their kids to meet the man who kept the road. One kid brought a drawing, stick figures, a bulldozer, and a big smiling face with a hat labeled, Grandpa. No D, but Grandpa put it up on the fridge like it was a diploma. The story spread further than we ever thought it would. Someone in town wrote a book. Another person made a short animated version that played in a community theater. Every version got a few things wrong, but the heart stayed right. An old man, his road, and the machine that didn't ask for permission. And now, when people talk about property rights in our state, they mention McKinley Drive. Not as a legal case. As a parable. A reminder that rules serve people, not the other way around. As for me, I stayed. Built a workshop behind Grandpa's shed. Started fixing up old machines, Bessie included. I like the work. I like the dust. I like the road. Every morning I walk it like I said I would, not because I have to, but because it reminds me who I am. Where I come from. The day Grandpa passes, and I know that day is coming though I try not to think about it, I know there'll be talk of naming the road after him officially. Maybe even a sign with his name on it. But he wouldn't want that. He just wanted driven on. Used. Respected. That's how you honor a man like him. You don't carve his name in stone. You let his footsteps echo. You keep the gravel clean. You teach your kids where the road came from, and you make sure no one ever fences it off again. McKinley Drive is quiet now. Peaceful. But it holds more weight than any street in the city. Because this road, this plain, dusty, sun-baked ribbon of gravel, is proof that one voice, one set of boots, and one stubborn machine can push back against the tide. Can say, enough. Can hold the line. I'll walk it for the rest of my life. And someday when I have kids they'll walk it too. Maybe they'll ask about the bulldozer. Maybe they'll ask about the fight. And when they do I'll tell them what Grandpa told me, some ground is worth standing on. And if they try to move you off it, you bring the whole damn machine.